So in this lighthouse drawing, we'll be using simple watercolour. It's quite a simple line and wash technique, this. It's sort of picture, for me, is quite reminiscent of like Peter Shearer and his kind of videos. So if you fancy putting this little lighthouse drawing on your wall, or you could study it in the privacy of your own house to see just how rough it is, then stick to the end and I'll tell you how you can win this. At this stage, I'm really not sure whether I'm going to put watercolour on it. So I start the inking process, and as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm copying some of the lines I've done originally, but I'm also sort of embellishing on them as I go and adding in some other bits that I think, looking at the reference drawing, I might need a little bit of dark there, I might need a little bit of detail there. I've already reduced that tree down a little bit, just to give a little bit more power, really, to the lighthouse, which is the primary kind of focus point, really, of this picture. And this picture is very much in that rule of thirds kind of thing. If you think about where the horizon is relative to the top and the bottom of the image, it's about a third of the way up. The lighthouse is about a third of the way over. It takes up about half the room, I know, but... and then I'm really just thinking about layers. I want something really close in the foreground, and then I want some midground, and then I want something towards the back. And then here, I don't know why I'm putting I don't know why that vertical line went in there, but anyway. So here's my sort of mid-foreground, if you know what I mean. So some of the line work you'll notice in things like the grass and those kind of areas, it's not always strictly clear what it is I'm trying to show. I might be trying to show a leaf, or it might be that there's some rocks there, or but I think primarily what it's saying is texture. There is texture here. And often, actually, we have such sophisticated computer models in our heads, if you know what I mean, or world visualization models. And we're born with those, and that enables us to understand things like faces, to understand expressions from a very young age. But those modelling, those 3D modelling packages that live in our brains also mean that we can fill in detail. Now, if you have an area where there's no detail, your brain will generally just fill that in with something. It will say, oh, that must be sea, or that must be sky. So often there's this temptation to sort of cover the whole page with colour or with line work, but you really don't have to do that. You can leave great big gaping open spaces, and our brain will just sort of make assumptions about everything that's kind of there, really. So I'm just putting in some of the details around the top of the lighthouse there. And then really it's just making a few decisions about actually, what I'm going to do with this frame and how am I going to put that sky in. And because I've not really decided at this point when I started this sketch whether I was going to actually put any watercolour on it, I'm starting to add some values. And really have a look and think, do I need watercolour, or should I just leave this as like a really nice, simple line sketch? So just to pull the lighthouse out of the image a bit and give it a bit of punch, what I've done there is I've put some heavier line width around the lighthouse, and that sort of makes that a bit more prominent in the scene. And then I've created, as you can see with pencil, a nice sort of arc shape over the top of the lighthouse there. And I'm just adding in some cross-hatching, really, quite thick, and this is just to say this is the dark bit of the sky. And again, I can go back in and add watercolour. It doesn't matter that I've put those cross-hatches in. It's just a style thing, really. Now here I did make a little mistake. I started too low with the cross-hatching, as you can see. But after a moment's hesitation, you just slowly correct it back up. It doesn't matter. Again, it's just paper. Monte Emeta Natural Sienna, but it's very much like a sort of yellow ochre, basically. And I tend to like to use a yellow ochre, a light brown, or a dark yellow, if you will, as a base colour, and then add in other colours on top of that. And that's often because the lightest bit you'll see in nature, generally on grass or on stonework, the lightest tones you see tend to be light browns. You don't tend to see a lot of very, white whites. And obviously, unless you're looking at a sky situation, or you're looking at sea or snow and things like that. So again, I think there's beauty at every stage, of of the sketching process, and you could quite equally just leave it there. I mean, that is a lovely sort of slightly hand-tinted drawing. It looks like a sort of hand-tinted lithograph type thing, but I can't resist. I must go on. So I'm adding in here some undersea green, which is that dark green that you get actually not only in sort of midwinter for like holly, but you also get it in late summer. And again, a bit more sap green, just to add a bit more, which is a bit more of a punchy green. And the way I'm adding the paint here is I'm just adding it wet in wet, so it sort of bleeds in and does its own sort of thing. I want it to move about and have a bit of life to it. And then adding a little bit of sort of grassy textures into, might as well have a play. So you can see the way the paint's moving around there. It's really fun when it does that. It sort of lives its own life. That's the kind of joy of watercolour. And I think, the more you can let the paint do its thing, sometimes the more spontaneous your pictures will be. That said, I've obviously reined it back a bit. So that's the first wash very much done. And what I'm going to do now is go and just add in a little bit of the sky detail. So to do that, I'm going to wet just the sky area and make sure that I don't wet the lighthouse or any of the others. And I'm just putting down a really simple, just a really simple water wash. And once that's done, I'll flip the piece over, and I'm just going to add in some blue towards the top. So I'm going to just choose some cobalt blue here. I think that's cobalt, or maybe cerulean actually. Yeah, that could be cerulean blue. I don't think that's cobalt. And I'm just going to bring that down. And because I've wet the page already, it's going to create a sort of softer area, soft edge area. So I'm putting in some dark pink here towards the, I think that's a bit of quinacridone rose there, towards the horizon. I mean, I think you're looking at the reference picture, there is definitely more sort of dark browns and creams and things in that area below there. And there's a little bit more pink on the lighthouse as well, actually. But, this is not an exercise in recreating things perfectly. It's an exercise in learning and just really having fun. So that's had another hairdry now. So we have a gradient in the sky and a nice soft sort of gradient on the ground. So it's really just a case of adding in those final details, really. I think the balance, if you sort of squint your eyes, the balance of the tones on the ground, the weights, quite sympathetic with what you can see in the sky there. So I think, but one of the things I've learned over the years is it's actually quite easy to under pigment this layer. And if you go in and you put like another slightly darker layer or a slightly darker layer on, it can end up looking a little bit wishy-washy. So I tend to work on the principle that, it doesn't actually matter if you add a bit too much pigment on, because you can always lift it off afterwards. But I think it's, if you keep in mind how much drier, how much lighter the pigment goes when it's dried, yeah, I mean, I would really say, go for it, be bold. So here we can see there's the grey area. If you look at the reference picture, there's the grey band that runs along the bottom of the lighthouse. And that also runs around the bottom of the building as if it's like a damp-proof course or something. But as soon as I put this in, I straight away thought that's just too dark. And actually, it's not particularly well done, if you know what I mean. So it didn't take me long to think, I'm just going to lift that out and try again. So just grab some tissue and just press hard on there, and you'll be able to suck out all that pigment. I actually use that technique sometimes for just actually creating textures, but quite soft textures. I'll just splash in lots and lots of watercolour, and then I'll actually just lift out what I don't want. It's definitely worth practicing that. So I'm going to actually put in here just that little first layer of red for the roof of the little building, and also for the lighthouse itself. And then it's off to the hairdryer. Okay, so the next layer on the roof, these little areas of dark just to create some texture of tiles and things and add in a tiny bit of shadow. So I'm putting in that last layer of shadow really there, and then it's one more trip to the hairdryer. For me, often the last few details you do on a drawing are the most pleasurable. So I'm looking at that now and I'm squinting my eyes a bit and wobbling the camera around. Don't know why I'm doing that quite so much. So what else do I need to do on this? Well, I think a couple of little gel pen touches, you know, just to add a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of pop to it. Can't do any harm. So adding in a tiny little bit of sort of the reflections on the bottom bit, and then adding in a little bit more contrast on some of the foliage there. Just a few dots of white often is enough just to give it a bit of punch. And that's pretty effective, I think. Always sign your work. Even if you don't like your drawing, sign your work. I think it's quite a nice ritual. So if you like this original piece and you've enjoyed watching it being created, it could actually be yours. All you have to do is 3 things. I want you just to like the video, subscribe, and put "I like this lighthouse" in the comments, or "I like this sketch," or just write something nice. Then I'll choose somebody at random about a month after this video has been released, and I'll be sending it off to you by post. So I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.